I'm Hannah, 27F, and for as long as I can remember, my parents were convinced I'd never survive without them. They were so sure I'd come crawling back the second I stepped out on my own. I made it my mission to prove them wrong. Growing up, it was clear my older brother, 30M, was the golden child. He could do no wrong. He got new clothes, new gadgets, expensive hobbies, and unlimited support. Meanwhile, I was the scapegoat. If something broke in the house, I was blamed. If money was tight, it was somehow my fault. If I wanted anything for myself, I was selfish and ungrateful. My parents had complete control over everything in my life. They made sure I didn't learn basic life skills, like how to budget, how to cook, or even how to apply for a job. Anytime I asked about getting a part-time job in high school, the answer was always the same: focus on your studies. You don't need to worry about money. But when my brother wanted extra cash for a concert or a trip with his friends, suddenly money wasn't a problem. I had dreams of going into graphic design. I loved art and spent hours teaching myself different design programs, watching online tutorials, and sketching ideas in secret. When I brought it up to my parents, they shut it down immediately. That's not a real job. You'll never make money doing that. You need to do something practical. Meanwhile, my brother was allowed to drift through life, changing his mind about his major 3 times before finally landing on business administration, which my parents happily funded. The final straw came during my senior year of high school. I had spent months researching financial aid and scholarships, knowing my parents wouldn't help me. They promised they'd handle my FAFSA application. After all, they knew how things worked better than I did. Except they forgot. By the time I realized, deadlines had passed and I was left scrambling. When I confronted them, they acted like it wasn't a big deal. You don't need to go to college right away. Just take a gap year and stay home. We'll figure something out. I knew then that if I didn't leave, I never would. What they didn't know was that I had been secretly working odd jobs, babysitting, tutoring, anything I could find, and stashing the money in a hidden account. The day I turned 18, I packed what I could carry, walked out, and never looked back. They didn't try to stop me. In fact, they laughed. You'll be back in a month. You have no idea how hard life is. They were right about one thing: life was hard. The first few years were brutal. I worked multiple jobs just to afford a tiny apartment with roommates. I took community college classes at night, using every free moment to build a design portfolio. There were nights I went to bed hungry, times when I barely scraped together rent, moments where I questioned if I could really do this. But I never called them. Not once. They, on the other hand, made it very clear they were keeping tabs on me. At family gatherings, which I wasn't invited to but heard about through mutual contacts, they'd mock me. She's probably working some dead-end job. She'll come running back any day now. What they didn't know was that I was clawing my way up. By 24, I landed my first real design job. By 26, I was making more than enough to live comfortably. And by 27, I had a stable remote UX/UI job, my own apartment, and zero contact with my parents. That was when they suddenly had a change of heart. It started with small messages: "Hey sweetie, how have you been? We miss you." Then came the invitations to visit, the forced nostalgia, the family group chat they suddenly decided to add me to. But I wasn't stupid. I knew this wasn't about me. It was about my brother. Turns out, Golden Boy had racked up a ridiculous amount of debt: credit cards, personal loans, business ventures that flopped. He was drowning. And worse, he had taken out loans using my parents' house as collateral. Now, they were panicking. The moment I didn't immediately offer to help, the mask slipped. The warm messages turned into, "After everything we've done for you, you're just going to abandon us?" I shut that down fast. Then came the extended family. Out of nowhere, relatives I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me. "Family is family. You have to help." My personal favorite: "You have a good job now. What's a little money to you?" That's when I decided to drop a bombshell. I wasn't just refusing to help. I was leaving the country. I had been planning it for months. I already had a visa lined up, a job waiting for me, and an apartment overseas. I had kept it quiet to avoid drama. But now I wanted them to know. When I told them, the reaction was exactly what I expected: panic, screaming, threats. My mother sobbing about how I was tearing the family apart. My father demanding to know who put these ideas in my head. My brother furious that I would abandon them when they needed me most. I let them rant. Then I blocked them. The best part, knowing that, for the first time in their lives, they couldn't do a damn thing about it. The meltdown started 2 days after I dropped the bombshell about moving overseas. The first call came from my mother. The moment I answered, all I could hear was sobbing. Full-on, gasping, dramatic wailing like someone had died. My father's voice cut through, sharp and frantic, demanding to know how I could be so selfish. They weren't asking me to reconsider my decision to leave anymore. They were begging me to stay. That's when they finally admitted why. It wasn't just that my brother had credit card debt. He had taken out multiple loans, using their house as collateral. He had been lying for years, covering it up with fake promises of an investment or a sure thing. But it was never a sure thing. It was reckless gambling, get-rich-quick schemes, failed business ideas. And now the bank was days away from taking their home. They needed money. A lot of it. And fast. I let them talk. Let them cry. Let them go on and on about how this wasn't just about them, how it was about family, how I was their last hope, how it wasn't fair for me to turn my back when I was doing so well, how they had always been there for me, how they had raised me, as if that was a debt I still owed them. I asked them one question: where was this energy when I was 18, sleeping on a mattress on the floor in a freezing apartment because I couldn't afford heating? Where was this support when I was skipping meals just to make rent? Where was the concern when I was struggling, alone, while they sat comfortably at family gatherings mocking me for failing? Silence. Then the switch flipped. The begging turned to demands. If I wasn't going to give them money, then I should at least lend it. Just a small loan. $50,000. Nothing too crazy. They'd pay me back. I'd barely even miss it, they said. That's when I laughed. Because they weren't desperate, they were entitled. They still saw me as the family failure. The one who had run away. The one they could ignore, dismiss, belittle. until they needed something. They hadn't changed. They weren't sorry, they were just out of options. I told them no. The screaming started immediately. My father demanding to know how I could let them lose everything. My mother shrieking that I was ungrateful, heartless, that she had carried me in her womb for 9 months and this was how I repaid her. My brother in the background, furious, because how dare I turn my back on my own family when I had so much to spare. Block. I cut them off right there. Blocked my parents, blocked my brother, and blocked every single number they had ever used to contact me. The messages started coming in through other numbers within minutes. Extended family I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had a lot to say. Messages flooded in. How could I abandon my own parents? How could I watch my brother suffer? Some of them went straight for manipulation. If your mother dies from the stress, it'll be your fault. I ignored all of them. And then a message from my aunt. This was the only one I read all the way through. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't guilt-tripping me. She was on my side. She had heard the truth. My parents hadn't been saving for retirement. They hadn't fallen on hard times, and they weren't struggling because of bad luck. They had been blowing their money on vacations, on gifts for my brother, on luxury purchases they couldn't afford. They had spent years throwing money into a financial black hole, convinced that if they ever ran out, they could just demand more from me. When I didn't give in, my brother lost it. He went straight to social media. A long, dramatic post about how some people forget their roots, about how family should come first, about how people with money shouldn't hoard it when others are suffering. He didn't name me outright, but it didn't take a genius to figure out who he was talking about. It backfired instantly. People roasted him in the comments. They weren't stupid. They asked why, if he was so desperate he wasn't working harder, selling things, taking responsibility. One person flat out said, "Bro, your sister owes you nothing. You sound entitled as hell." Then, the final blow, someone exposed him. A former friend commented, dropping receipts, screenshots of texts, messages, and proof that my brother had lied on his loan applications. He had fake documents, inflated his income, and now, the bank was coming after him. It was only getting worse. That's when my parents went nuclear. They emailed my job. An actual email sent to HR claiming I was abandoning my family obligations and that my company should reconsider employing someone so heartless. It didn't work. My boss called me in, showed me the email, and asked if I was okay. "This is harassment, and we can take action if needed," he offered. HR had already sent a polite but firm reply, "We do not engage in personal matters. Please refrain from contacting us again." That was it. I made my decision right then and there. I was leaving earlier. That night, I changed my flight. I moved everything up. In less than a week, I'd be gone. And this time, there was nothing they could do to stop me. The flight was booked, my bags were packed, and in less than 24 hours, I'd be gone. For good. Everything was planned down to the last detail, except for one thing. Somehow, my family found out. Later, I learned that a distant cousin who I had trusted with the information had let it slip to a nosy aunt. That was all it took. Within hours, my phone started blowing up. Unknown numbers, private calls, family members I hadn't heard from in years suddenly desperate to talk to me. That's when I knew someone had leaked my flight info. I ignored every single call, turned off notifications, grabbed my suitcase and headed straight for the airport. It was crowded when I got there. Loud. I moved fast, weaving through people, keeping my head down. I checked in, got through security, and made it to my gate. No issues. And then I heard it. A screeching voice echoing across the terminal. I turned. My parents and my brother were standing right there. People were already staring. My mother was crying, loudly. My father looked furious. And my brother? Absolutely raging. They weren't just at the airport. They had found my gate. I didn't react, just turned away, facing the boarding area. They weren't my problem anymore. That's when my brother started yelling, loud enough for everyone to hear, shouting about how I was abandoning them, how I was selfish, how I was going to ruin my parents' lives by leaving. People were watching now. A few whispered. Some pulled out their phones. I saw an airport worker glance over, frowning. Then my mother collapsed, right there on the floor, hands clutching her chest, wailing. The fake breakdown. People rushed to help. A woman asked if she needed a doctor. Another person offered water. My father started shouting about how I was killing my own mother by leaving. Security arrived fast. 2 officers. Calm, professional. They asked what was happening. My mother, still on the ground, sobbed that her daughter was abandoning her, that I had been brainwashed, that I was being manipulated by outsiders. My brother pointed directly at me, told the officers I was a horrible person. I didn't respond, just pulled out my boarding pass, held it up. The airline worker nodded, waved me toward the gate. Boarding had started. That's when my father grabbed my suitcase, not to stop me, to open it. He went straight for my passport. Airport security immediately stepped in, told him to let go. He argued, tried to act like it was a misunderstanding. They didn't care. They told him if he didn't leave, they'd escort him out. I stepped forward, looked at my parents, looked at my brother, one last time. Then I said it, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll send you a postcard if I remember you exist." And then I walked away, stepped onto the plane, took my seat, fastened my seatbelt. The doors closed. And for the first time in my life, I was free. The moment the plane landed in my new country, I turned on my phone. Dozens of messages. My voicemail was full. Emails flooded in, all from family. Blocked. Every single one. I stepped out of the airport into a whole new world. No more parents, no more brother, no more guilt. Just me and the life I had worked so hard for. The first few weeks were an adjustment, paperwork, cultural shifts, getting used to a new workplace, but every challenge reminded me why I had left. I spent the first few days settling in, setting up my new place, meeting new people. Then, the news came in. My parents lost their house. It was official. The bank took everything. They had to move into a rental. And my brother? His life completely fell apart. The lawsuit hit hard. His lenders weren't just suing him, they were going after everything. His car? Repossessed. His credit? Destroyed. He had no money left. and no one to bail him out. The family's reaction was split. Some relatives, livid. They called me heartless, cruel, selfish. But others, some actually reached out just to say one thing: good for you. Apparently, I wasn't the first person my parents had screwed over. I wasn't the first person my brother had used. I was just the first person who escaped. I made one last decision. I cut ties with those who had sided with my parents, those who had guilt-tripped me, those who had treated me like a bank account. But some, like my aunt who had warned me about my parents' financial recklessness, I kept at a distance but didn't completely shut out. A few months later, I heard the final update. My brother? He had tried to pick himself back up. A new job, a new online scheme, a desperate attempt to rebrand himself as a financial guru. Until that, too, fell apart. And still, he refused to take responsibility for his mistakes. My parents? Still struggling, still expecting someone to save them. But it wasn't my problem anymore, because I had one, and they never saw it coming. 1 year. That's how long it had been since I left. Since I walked away from the chaos, the guilt, and the never-ending demands. And in that 1 year, everything changed. I was thriving. I had settled into my new country completely. My apartment, bright, modern, and mine, was in a beautiful neighborhood. My job? Better than ever. I had gone from a stable position to a huge promotion, managing my own projects with a fat raise attached. The kind of success my family swore I'd never have. Weekends were spent exploring, meeting new people, traveling to places I had only ever dreamed of visiting. My life was full. And my family? Still struggling. They had tried everything to get back in contact. Emails, calls, messages from random relatives, new social media accounts made just to reach me. Each one saying the same thing: we miss you. We just want to talk. Your mother is heartbroken. Blocked. Every time. But the one that stood out, a long-winded email from my father. Not an apology, not regret. Just a full-on guilt trip about how they were barely making ends meet in their new rental. How their lives had fallen apart without my help. How they had sacrificed so much for me, and now they had nothing. At the very end, a money request? I never responded. They weren't reaching out because they had changed. They were reaching out because I was still useful to them. And now that I wasn't, they were desperate. Blocked. Again. My brother? Still the same. A full year later, and nothing had changed. He was still broke. Still jobless. Still blaming everyone but himself. The lawsuit had wrecked him. His credit was shot. His lenders took everything. And because he had never actually worked for anything in his life, he had no idea how to survive without handouts. And when I didn't come running to save him, he found a new scapegoat. I heard it through a cousin. After I was gone for good, my parents turned to someone else. A younger cousin, barely 20, fresh out of school, naive. My parents spun the same sob story about how they were on the verge of losing everything. About how family should help family. About how it was just a small favor. And for a while, it worked. Until my cousin realized the truth. Realized that every dollar they gave was another dollar my parents wasted. That's when they cut my parents off too. And just like that, my parents lost their second lifeline. Meanwhile, I was living my best life. Work was amazing. I was in a healthy, supportive relationship, the kind my parents would have tried to ruin if they still had access to me. I had real friends, people who cared about me because of who I was, not what I could do for them. The guilt? Gone. Therapy had done wonders. I had unpacked everything. Every manipulation, every guilt trip, every ounce of conditioning that made me think I owed my parents something. Now, I didn't owe them anything. Then came the final move. I changed everything. New phone number. New email. Even my social media handles. I erased every way they could reach me. And that's when they finally gave up. The messages stopped. The fake apologies disappeared. And that's when I knew I was free. One morning I sat on my balcony. Sun shining. A warm breeze. A cup of coffee in my hand. That's when I got a letter. From a distant cousin. Not an attack. Not a guilt trip. Just a simple message. You did the right thing. Apparently I wasn't the only one who saw through the lies. And for the first time in my life, I laughed. Because they thought I'd crawl back. They thought I'd fail. They thought I'd come running, desperate, begging for their approval. But I never did. And that was the best revenge of all. A year of peace. A year of no contact. A year of living life on my terms. But something still lingered. My last name. It was still a connection to them. A reminder of the people who had spent years tearing me down, controlling me, using me. Even though they were gone from my life, their name was still attached to mine, sitting on every official document, every emolument, every legal form, every email signature. That was about to change. The process started quietly. I filed the paperwork, paid the fees, scheduled the appointments. No announcements. No warnings. No one needed to know. The waiting period began. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Somehow, a distant relative found out. Not someone close. Not someone I had spoken to in years. Just another nosy family member who loved drama. And they ran straight to my parents. It didn't take long. Within days, my inbox was flooded. Emails. Multiple. Some long-winded and dramatic, others short and furious. Why are you doing this? This is a slap in the face. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us. Blocked. Then came the phone calls. Unknown numbers. Random relatives. Even my brother. The voicemails were worse. My mother's voice, breaking, sobbing, saying she forgave me for running away. Saying I didn't need to do this. My father's voice, angry, demanding. Telling me I was being dramatic, childish. And my brother, livid. Talking about how I was ruining family unity. How I was disrespecting our legacy. How I was making a fool of them. I let the messages pile up. Then I deleted all of them. Blocked. Again. Then, they tried my job. Again. A pathetic, last-ditch attempt to guilt-trip me through my workplace. This time, it was worse. They sent an official-sounding email to HR pretending to be concerned, talking about how their daughter was in distress, making reckless decisions, being manipulated by outsiders. HR forwarded it to me. One sentence. Would you like us to block them? I told them, yes. That was it. They were cut off for good. A cousin reached out after the drama exploded, not to guilt trip me, to laugh about it. Apparently, my parents and brother had spent the past week ranting to anyone who would listen. They were furious, talking about how I had betrayed them, how I had thrown away my identity. Nobody was taking their side. Most people didn't care. Some thought it was hilarious. Because at the end of the day, they had done this to themselves. The name change was finally approved. Holding the official document in my hands, an instant weight lifted. For the first time, my name was mine, not theirs. Not something tied to people who tried to control me. Mine. That night I went out with friends, celebrated, toasted to a new identity, a new life, a future where my past couldn't follow me anymore. And that's when I made my final decision. I wrote a letter, not to send, not to reach out, just for me. Every word I had never said to them, every moment they had belittled me, hurt me, abandoned me, every fake apology, every lie, every manipulation. I wrote it all. Then I burned it, because they weren't worth the effort. That's when it hit me. They never had power over me. Not really. I just thought they did. Now, I was free. No last name tying me to them. No way for them to reach me, control me, guilt me. They were just a bad story I had outgrown. And with that, I moved forward. 2 years. That's how long it had been since I disappeared from my family's life. 2 years of peace. 2 years of thriving. 2 years of no contact. And then, I got engaged. It wasn't sudden. I had been in a strong, healthy relationship for over a year. A partner who respected me, who had never tried to control me, who had never made me feel like I had to prove my worth. The engagement was simple, private, perfect. The wedding? Even smaller. Only close friends. A few trusted family members. No big announcements. No drama. Except one person found out. And that was all it took. The first email arrived a month before the wedding. My mother. After years of silence, she suddenly wanted to reconnect before the big day. She didn't ask how I was. Didn't acknowledge any of the damage she had caused. Just launched into the usual script. How family is forever. How I would regret not having my parents at my wedding. How she forgave me for cutting them off. As if she was the victim. Blocked. Days later, my brother. A long, entitled rant about how it was only right for him to walk me down the aisle. As if he hadn't spent years treating me like I was beneath him. As if he had ever supported me, ever been there for me, ever seen me as anything other than a backup plan. Blocked. Then came the emotional blackmail. Emails. More calls from random relatives. Messages flooding in. You'll regret this forever. You're making a huge mistake. You can't erase family. Blocked. Again. At that point, I knew. They weren't just trying to guilt trip me. They were going to show up. So I took 0 chances. I called the venue. Explained the situation. Sent them official notice. Security was notified. Names were banned. Extra precautions were set up. There would be no surprises. Except, of course, they still tried. The wedding day. The ceremony was already starting when they arrived. Not quietly. Not calmly. They made a scene. Screaming at the staff. Demanding to be let in. My mother, crying on cue. My father, angry and red-faced. And my brother, furious. Shouting about how I was ruining the family. How I was embarrassing them. How this was their right. Security was ready. They were removed immediately. Not a warning. Not a discussion. Escorted off the property. Inside, the ceremony continued. No interruptions. No distractions. Just a perfect day. I didn't find out about the meltdown outside until later. Guests saw them arguing with security. My mother, eyes glistening with forced tears, pleaded with the staff at the entrance. She's my daughter. This is a family event. My father stood behind her, stiff with anger, glaring at the security guards blocking their way. Someone took photos. Someone else filmed it. Later, a few guests laughed about it. Because at the end of the day, it was pathetic. That night, while I was celebrating, my brother was raging online. A full Facebook post. How I had betrayed him. How I had abandoned family. How I was ungrateful. It went exactly how I expected. Nobody took his side. Comments were brutal. People called him entitled. Told him to grow up. Someone even linked his old scam business. And me? I didn't read a word of it. Just blocked him. The next morning, I got on a plane. 2 weeks. A dream honeymoon. No drama. No stress. No family ruining anything. And by the time I returned, they had finally stopped trying. Blocked. Erased. Gone. Forever. Years passed. By now, I was in my 30s. A house. A career. A life so far removed from my parents, they might as well have been strangers. Their attempts to contact me had faded over time. Fewer emails. Fewer unknown numbers. But every now and then, a distant relative would still try to check in. It had been quiet for a while. Or so I thought. Then, one day, an email arrived. Not from them. From a lawyer handling my late grandfather's estate. The terms of the will required unanimous approval from all beneficiaries before assets could be distributed. My parents had assumed I'd be an easy signature. Instead, they were stuck waiting on me. Every single one had to sign off on the division of assets. And that included me. It was almost funny. After years of treating me like I didn't exist, they suddenly needed me. They weren't reaching out to apologize, not to make amends. They needed my signature. They thought I'd just agree. Sign the papers. Let them take everything. Like I was still the quiet, obedient scapegoat they had walked all over for years. I didn't respond. Instead, I got my own lawyer. No direct contact. No family discussions. Just legal action. Days later, a second email. This time, from my brother. It wasn't like the last time he had reached out. No entitlement. No screaming. Just begging. Talking about how he was drowning. How life had been so hard without my help. How he had changed. How I owed him this. Ignored. Blocked. Then, a voicemail from my mother. Desperate. Crying. Acting like she was the loving parent I had never had. Saying how she missed me. How she didn't want things to end like this. But at the very end, a slip. A single sentence that exposed the entire act. We just need you to do the right thing and sign. That was all it was. Manipulation. Blocked. The legal process moved fast. Turns out my parents had tried to twist the will in their favor. They had assumed I'd be an easy signature. But now, they had to fight for their cut. And they lost. I took my fair share. Not a cent more. Not a cent less. But I gave them nothing. Not a penny. The final meltdown came fast. One last email. From both of them. Rage. Insults. Calling me evil. Selfish. A disgrace. How I had betrayed my own family. How they wished they never had me. The same old script. This time, I responded. One last message. This is the last time you'll ever hear from me. Then I deleted their emails. Changed my number. And for the first time in my life, I walked away for good. Years passed. I was in my late 30s now. A life so far removed from my past, it barely felt real. No more guilt. No more baggage. Just peace. I hadn't thought about my family in years. Not once. The last time I had heard about them, through a distant relative, my parents, still struggling, broke, bitter, complaining about how life had been so unfair to them. My brother, now in his 40s, still jobless, still blaming everyone but himself, still waiting for someone to swoop in and save him. None of it was my problem. And that was the best part. My life, thriving, financially secure, traveling when I wanted, taking care of myself. A real family, one I had built. Friends who were there for me. A husband who actually loved and respected me. In-laws who treated me better than my own parents ever had. I had everything I had ever wanted, and I had done it without them. I never crawled back. Not once. And that was the ultimate revenge. Vacations. Dinners at beautiful restaurants. Lazy Sundays on my couch, watching the sunset through my window. The life they swore I'd never have. The life they tried to steal from me. And I had won. Looking back, I wouldn't change a single thing. Every hardship. Every moment of doubt. Every time they tried to break me. It had all led to this. Freedom. Happiness. A life where they no longer existed. To anyone reading this, anyone who has ever been trapped in a toxic family, you don't owe them anything. Not your time. Not your time. Not your energy. Not your life. Live for yourself. And never ever look back.